AITA for kicking my sister and her kids out after they took over my house? I never thought I would be in this position, but here we are. I, 34M, have an older sister, Lisa, 38F, who has always been the favorite in our family. Growing up, she was the golden child while I was the one who had to fight for attention. Despite this, I have always tried to be there for her and help her whenever she needed it. But now I feel like she's taken advantage of my kindness, and I don't know if I went too far by kicking her out. A little background. I bought my house 3 years ago after working my ass off to save up for it. I was finally in a stable position, had a great job, and was enjoying my space. I've always been a bit of an introvert, so having a peaceful home was really important to me. Lisa, on the other hand, has struggled financially for years. She has 2 kids, 9M and 6F, and was married to a guy who was honestly a piece of work. He cheated on her multiple times, barely worked, and was overall just a deadbeat. She finally left him last year and moved into a small apartment, but she kept complaining about how tiny it was and how hard it was being a single mom. I felt for her, I really did. So when she called me crying one night, saying that her landlord had raised the rent and she couldn't afford it anymore, I told her she could stay with me for a while until she got back on her feet. I made it clear that this was temporary and that we'd have to discuss boundaries since I valued my space. She agreed and promised it wouldn't be for long. At first, everything was fine. The kids were adjusting, and Lisa seemed grateful. I helped her with job applications, watched the kids when she had interviews, and even let them have the guest room while I converted my home office into my bedroom. I figured it would be a couple of months at most, and then she'd find a new place. But things started changing fast. First, Lisa became way too comfortable. She wasn't in a rush to find a job and instead spent her days watching TV or scrolling through her phone. When I asked her about it, she said she was just taking a break after all the stress of moving. Then, her kids completely took over the house. They left toys everywhere, drew on the walls, yes, actually took markers and scribbled all over, and had complete meltdowns whenever I asked them to clean up after themselves. Lisa would just laugh it off and say, "They're just kids." What pushed me over the edge was when Lisa started making decisions as if my house was hers. One day, I came home to find that she had moved my furniture around without asking. My couch, my dining table, even my bedroom furniture. When I confronted her, she said, "I thought the space would work better this way." I told her that this was still my home and that she needed to respect my things. She rolled her eyes but said she understood. Then a few weeks later, she threw a party at my house without telling me. I came home from work to find a bunch of moms and kids running around, eating food from my fridge and making a mess. I pulled Lisa aside and asked her what the hell she was thinking. She just shrugged and said, "I thought it would be fun for the kids." That was the last straw. I told her we needed to have a serious talk. I sat her down and explained that this arrangement wasn't working anymore. She had been there for 5 months at this point, and instead of looking for a job and finding her own place, she had completely taken over my home. I told her she had 2 months to figure things out because I couldn't keep supporting her like this. She flipped out. She started crying, yelling that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. She accused me of being selfish and said that family is supposed to help each other. She even called our parents and got them involved. Of course, my parents took her side. They told me I was being cruel, that Lisa had been through a lot, and that I should be more patient. When I told them they were welcome to take her in, they suddenly had a million excuses for why they couldn't. Lisa refused to talk to me for days, giving me the cold shoulder and acting like a victim. But I stood my ground. I reminded her every week that she needed to find a place, and when the deadline came, I told her she had to go. She packed up her things, but not before leaving the house in complete chaos. She didn't clean anything, left trash everywhere, and even took some of my kitchen appliances, claiming she needed them more than I did. Now she's staying with a friend, but she's still bad-mouthing me to everyone, saying I threw a single mom and 2 kids out onto the street. My parents are pissed, mutual friends are divided, and I'm sitting here wondering if I was too harsh. I didn't want things to end like this, but I feel like she took advantage of my kindness and disrespected my home. I don't think I should have to sacrifice my peace and space just because she made bad decisions in her life. So, AITA for kicking my sister and her kids out after they took over my house. AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she kicked my dog out of her house. So a little backstory. I, 28M, have a sister, Kate, 26F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. We grew up together, but we've never really been that close. She's always been the type to act like she's the boss of everyone, and that she knows better than anyone else. Growing up, she would always dictate what we were doing, how we were doing it, and frankly, I found it exhausting. I've always been a bit more laid back and independent. I moved out of my parents' house at 22, got my own place, and started my career. I'm not perfect, but I'm responsible and generally keep to myself. I'm also a huge dog lover. I adopted a dog named Max about 3 years ago from a shelter. Max is a 4-year-old mixed breed, and he's my absolute best friend. He's calm, friendly, and well-behaved, especially around people. I put in the time to train him and ensure he's well-adjusted, and I'm really proud of how well he's turned out. Now, about a year ago, Kate and her husband, Tom, 28M, moved into a new house about 45 minutes away from me. Kate and Tom both have good jobs, and they were doing well, but they needed to downsize and move closer to the city for work. She asked if I could come help her pack up a few things before they moved in, and of course I helped. I knew it would be a big transition for her, and I didn't mind lending a hand. When they settled into their new house, Kate reached out and asked if I wanted to visit. I was excited to see their new place, and I decided to bring Max along because he's part of the family. She had no objections at the time, and everything went smoothly. Max was on his best behavior, and I thought Kate was warming up to him more. She wasn't really a dog person, but she seemed tolerant. However, things took a turn when I went to visit her again a few months later. I showed up with Max, as usual, and Kate immediately started making weird comments about how he was shedding too much, how his paws were dirty, and how she could smell dog hair in the air. I didn't think much of it, but I could tell she wasn't really enjoying his presence. Tom was much more relaxed about it, and didn't mind Max being around. Still, I didn't want to push it, so I spent the majority of the visit in the backyard with Max. But then things escalated. Kate came outside after about an hour and told me that Max had tracked mud into the house when we were in the yard. Now, for the record, Max is a dog. He doesn't wear shoes. He's an indoor dog, but he's never been allowed to ruin someone's home, so I was surprised by the accusation. She insisted I clean up after him, but she wasn't asking politely. She was demanding. So I did, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. A couple of weeks later, Kate invited me to come over again for a small get-together with some of her friends. She mentioned she wanted me to leave Max at home this time. I said no, because Max is my responsibility, and I wasn't comfortable leaving him alone for hours. I had no other option but to bring him with me, especially considering how much I trusted him. She didn't seem too happy, but she reluctantly agreed. When I arrived, things were awkward. Kate was very cold towards me, and she spent most of the time with her friends, ignoring me and Max. At one point, Max got a little overexcited when one of her friends approached him, and he jumped up to greet them. It was nothing aggressive, just enthusiasm, but Kate freaked out. She started yelling at me to control him, and when I asked what the issue was, she told me he was making her guests uncomfortable. That's when I had enough. I wasn't about to let her treat Max like that. I took him and left without saying much. Kate called me afterward, demanding an explanation for why I'd stormed out. I told her I wasn't going to tolerate her mistreatment of my dog, and if she didn't want Max around, she was welcome to tell me, and I wouldn't visit anymore. She was really upset, but I stuck to my stance. Then, things got really bad. Kate called me a couple of months ago and said she and Tom had some serious financial issues and needed to move in with me temporarily while they got back on their feet. At first, I said I'd think about it, but then she mentioned something in passing that made my stomach drop. She said that maybe this time it would be nice if Max could stay at my parents' place for the duration. She didn't ask. She suggested it. She was asking me to leave my dog behind because she didn't want him in her house. I was furious. This wasn't a casual request. She knew how much Max meant to me. We've been through a lot together, and I wasn't about to betray that bond for her comfort. I told her that I couldn't accommodate her if she was going to dictate who could live in my house. I didn't want to hear her complaints about Max, and I certainly didn't want her trying to change my living situation. I told her no, that she could figure things out without imposing on me. Kate was absolutely livid. She accused me of being selfish, of choosing a dog over family, and not supporting her when she was going through a rough time. She said I was cruel for refusing to help her out during a difficult period, and that I was making this all about Max instead of her. She even suggested that I didn't care about family and would rather see her and Tom suffer. I didn't cave. I stood firm, and eventually she stopped talking to me. She and Tom went to live with her in-laws, and they've been there for the past few months. Now, my parents are angry with me. They think I should have just put my dog somewhere else for a while and helped Kate and Tom. They keep saying I'm being too rigid about my rules when it comes to Max, and that family should come first. Kate hasn't spoken to me since, and it feels like she's trying to guilt-trip me into backing down. Tom has reached out to apologize on her behalf, but I still feel like I did the right thing. I've had people, mostly mutual friends of Kate and me, tell me I should have just sucked it up and let Kate stay with me. That family comes first, and I'm letting something trivial like a dog get in the way of helping my sister when she needs it the most. So now, I'm asking, AITA for refusing to let my sister move in because she demanded I get rid of my dog? AITA for kicking my roommate out after he treated my apartment like a free hotel? I, 27M, have been living in my current apartment for about 4 years. It's a great place in a decent neighborhood, and I worked hard to afford it. Last year, my longtime roommate, Chris, 28M, moved out after getting married, which meant I had to either find a new roommate or cover the rent alone. I wasn't in a financial crisis, but I figured having someone to split costs with would be ideal. Enter Jake, 26M. Jake and I went to college together, but we were more acquaintances than close friends. He reached out when he saw my post about looking for a roommate and said he was looking for a place since he was moving to the city for a new job. He seemed responsible enough, had a stable job, good references, and was generally easygoing. Plus, I figured having someone I vaguely knew was better than a total stranger. At first, things were fine. He paid his share of the rent on time, helped with groceries, and was generally clean. But within 2 months, I started noticing some serious red flags. First, he started having guests over constantly. I don't mean the occasional friend or a weekend hangout. I mean he treated my apartment like a crash pad for random people. I would wake up in the morning to find some guy I'd never met passed out on our couch or a girl stumbling out of his room, clearly hungover. I brought it up, and he just laughed it off, saying, "Dude, I'm just a social person. You should join in sometime." I'm not against socializing, but I also work long hours and value my space. I asked him to keep it to weekends at least, and he said he'd try. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Then he stopped buying groceries. At first, it was little things. He'd borrow a bit of milk or use my coffee pods. But over time, he was eating full meals out of my fridge, finishing snacks I bought, and even drinking my protein shakes. I confronted him, and he acted surprised, saying, "I figured we were just sharing. You can have my stuff too." The problem was he never had stuff. His shelf in the fridge was basically empty, except for half a bottle of ketchup and a can of expired soda. The worst part? He started disappearing for weeks at a time. One time, he mentioned he was going on a weekend trip. Cool, no problem. But then he just didn't come back. A week passed. Then 2. I texted him to ask if everything was okay, and he replied super casually, "Oh yeah, I decided to stay with a friend for a bit. I'll be back soon." That soon turned into nearly a month. And when he finally did return, he acted like nothing had happened. I asked him why he was still paying rent when he wasn't even here, and he said, "Dude, I just like having a place to crash when I'm in town. It's nice knowing I have a home base." At that point, I started realizing he was literally just using my apartment as a glorified storage unit. He was never around, never contributed to bills beyond rent, and when he was here, he was throwing parties or mooching off my stuff. The final straw was when I came home from work one night and found the apartment a complete disaster. Beer bottles everywhere. A pizza box left open on the counter with half-eaten slices. A random girl, who I had never seen before, asleep on my couch with a blanket from my bed. I lost it. I woke Jake up and told him that this was it. I was done. He needed to pack his things and leave. He acted shocked, saying, "Wait, what? Over one night?" I reminded him that this wasn't one night. It was months of him treating my place like a hotel while expecting me to pick up the slack. I told him he had 2 weeks to find another place. He flipped out, called me uptight, said I was being unfair, and tried to guilt-trip me by saying he had nowhere else to go. I reminded him that he literally had places to go since he was staying with other friends half the time anyway. He left that night and stayed with someone else, but not before bad-mouthing me in a group chat we were both in, calling me a control freak and an asshole for kicking out a friend in need. Now some mutual friends are saying I was too harsh and that I should have given him more time. I personally think I was more than patient. So, AITA for kicking my roommate out? AITA for refusing to attend my wedding after my sister tried to bring her kids, even though I specifically told her no kids were invited? So some context. I, 29F, have been with my fiancé Jake, 31M, for about 5 years, and we've been planning our wedding for almost a year now. I've always envisioned a very intimate, adults-only wedding. It's just how I've always dreamed of it, small, cozy, with close friends and family, and no children. We both come from large families, so keeping the guest list manageable has been a bit of a challenge, but we've made it work. I also know that many people prefer weddings without kids, and that's just our style. Now my sister Rachel, 32F, is a bit of a different case. She has 2 young kids, Ben, 5, and Emma, 3. Rachel is a great mom, but she's always been a bit challenging, for lack of a better word. She's the type of person who expects special treatment or accommodation everywhere she goes because she has kids. She's always a bit on edge about leaving them with a sitter, and I get it, it's hard being a mom. But my wedding was something I've planned for years, and I wanted it to be a special day for me, not a chaotic one. From the very beginning, I told everyone, including Rachel, that the wedding was going to be adults only. I sent out invitations with clear wording, specifying no children, and I personally made sure to mention it to Rachel, given that she's one of the closest people to me. I told her I totally understood if she couldn't make it because of the kids, but that I really wanted the day to be just for adults. She said she understood and that she'd try to figure something out. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, and Rachel calls me in the middle of the day. She says, "Hey, I was just thinking, there's no way I can leave Ben and Emma for the whole day. You know how hard it is for me to find a sitter that I trust, and it's just such a big deal for me to be at your wedding. Can I bring them with me?" I was caught off guard. I calmly reminded her that I had made it clear, both in the invite and in person, that it was going to be an adults-only event. I told her I knew it was a big ask, but it was really important to me that the wedding stay the way I envisioned it. She got upset. She said, "I can't believe you're being so inflexible. It's just kids. It's not like they're going to ruin anything." She said that she couldn't imagine coming without them because it would be too hard on her, and I told her I understood, but I still couldn't make exceptions. I told her if she felt like she really couldn't come without them, then maybe it would be best if she didn't come at all, because I wasn't willing to make this compromise. She hung up on me, and I didn't hear from her for a few days. I thought maybe she'd cool off, but instead, she doubled down. A few days later, she sent me a long message, telling me I was being selfish and unreasonable. She said that I was putting my dream wedding over family, and that I clearly didn't care about her feelings or the fact that she was a mom with responsibilities. She went on to say that I shouldn't be so focused on what I wanted and should think about what family means, implying that I wasn't prioritizing our bond as sisters. I was hurt by this. I had always been there for her when she needed support with the kids or during tough times. She knew how much this day meant to me, and the fact that she was accusing me of not caring about family felt like a punch in the gut. I told her that it wasn't about not caring about family, but about me having boundaries and wanting my wedding day to go the way I envisioned it. I also pointed out that I'd gone out of my way to accommodate other family members with special requests, and that this was really the one thing I had asked for, and she couldn't respect it. After that, she started talking to other family members about the situation. I know this because my mom, 58F, called me asking if I could just let it go and let Rachel bring the kids. She said it wasn't fair for me to put my sister in a position where she felt excluded from a major event, especially because she's a mom. She said that kids are part of our family, and it wasn't right for me to exclude them. My mom even suggested that I make a special exception just for Rachel, since it was her first time being in this kind of situation. I told her I couldn't do that and reiterated that I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. Then, things got really tense. Rachel started spreading rumors within the family, saying that I was being cruel and that my wedding was more important than family. A few of our other relatives reached out to me, and I started to feel like I was under attack. Rachel said that if I really cared about her, I'd let her bring the kids because this was the only way she could come. My other family members started agreeing with her and began pressuring me to let her bring them. It started to feel like my entire wedding was at risk of being overshadowed by this one issue. At this point, I was fed up. I was still firm in my decision, but the guilt was eating at me. I kept second-guessing myself. Was I being too rigid? Was I being unreasonable? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was my day, and I had every right to make it the way I wanted. I knew that if I made an exception for Rachel, it would set a precedent that everyone could pressure me into changing things for their convenience. And that wasn't fair to me. I decided to stand my ground and told Rachel, once again, that I wasn't changing my mind. I also told her that if she wasn't able to come without the kids, I would understand, but that I was not going to allow them at the wedding. I felt awful about it, but I really didn't want to cave. I was doing what I thought was best for me. That's when Rachel really snapped. She told me that if I didn't want her to come, then I could just go ahead and ruin our relationship over my selfish wedding. She said she wasn't going to beg me, and that I could just have my perfect day without her. She hasn't spoken to me since. Now my entire family is divided. Some of them are supporting Rachel, saying that I should have just been more understanding, while others agree with me, saying I have every right to make my wedding what I want. But the tension is unbearable. I haven't spoken to Rachel in over a month, and now the wedding is just a few weeks away. I'm really struggling here. Part of me feels like I'm in the right. I made my boundaries clear, and I'm not asking for much. But another part of me feels horrible about losing my sister over something like this, especially when everyone is calling me selfish and stubborn. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister bring her kids to my wedding, even after all the pressure from her and the family? AITA for telling my sister she's not the main character in everyone's life and kicking her out? I, 29M, have a younger sister, Lisa, 25F, who has always had a flair for the dramatic. Growing up, she was the type who needed to be the center of attention. Family gatherings? She had to be the loudest voice in the room. Someone else's birthday? She would somehow find a way to make it about her. I used to think it was just a phase, but as we got older, it only got worse. For context, I own a small but decent house. I work in IT, and while I'm not rich, I'm comfortable. Lisa, on the other hand, has never really settled on anything. She's gone through about 6 different career paths in the past few years: photography, acting, fashion design, some sort of wellness coaching, and most recently, social media influencing. She never sticks with anything for more than a few months before deciding the world is against her and moving on to something else. She was living with a roommate up until last year, when she had a massive falling out with them over something ridiculous. I think they used her coffee creamer once, and after that, she had nowhere to go. She called me in tears, saying she was practically homeless. And since I didn't want her actually sleeping in her car, I told her she could stay with me temporarily. Huge mistake. At first, I thought it would be fine. I made it clear that it was a short-term thing, just a couple of months until she got back on her feet. She agreed. For the first few weeks, she kept saying she was looking for jobs, but all she did was stay up all night, sleep until noon, and then complain that the job market was impossible. Then came the influencer phase. She started posting online about how she was grinding and manifesting success. What was she actually doing? Filming herself making smoothies, trying on outfits she never bought, and giving life advice despite having zero life experience. The worst part? She started treating my house like her personal studio. She rearranged my furniture because it didn't fit the aesthetic she wanted for her content. She covered my kitchen counters with random decorations and ring lights. And she even started using my home office, which I need for actual work, because the lighting is better. One day, I walked in on her recording a video in my living room where she was pretending to cook a gourmet meal, except the stove wasn't even on. She just had raw vegetables in a pan and was narrating like she was some master chef. When I called her out, she got mad and said, "It's about the visuals, not the actual food." I tried to set boundaries. I told her she couldn't take over my space like this, and she needed to contribute to groceries and bills if she was staying longer. She rolled her eyes and said, "Exposure is worth more than money," like that was supposed to mean something to me. But the final straw came last week. I had a friend over, Mark, who I've known for years. He recently went through a bad breakup, and we were just hanging out, having some beers and catching up. Lisa walked in, took one look at him, and immediately switched into content mode. She started asking him invasive questions about his breakup, trying to give him some nonsense, self-love speech, and then, without his permission, she started recording him. Mark was visibly uncomfortable and asked her to stop. Instead of apologizing, she said, "No, this is good. People love raw, emotional content." I was done. I grabbed her phone, stopped the recording, and told her that this was it. She had officially worn out her welcome. I told her she had a week to find somewhere else to go because I wasn't going to let her turn my house into her reality show any longer. She freaked out, started crying, and accused me of ruining her career before it even started. She said I was jealous because I had a boring office job and didn't get it. When I stood my ground, she ran to our parents, who, of course, took her side. They called me and said I was being too harsh and that family helps family. I reminded them that Lisa had been mooching off me for almost a year, refused to contribute to anything, and disrespected my space. If they were so worried, they could take her in. Suddenly, they had a bunch of excuses. Dad said their house was too small. Mom said Lisa would be too stressed living with them. So, apparently it's my problem, but not theirs. Lisa has since been blasting me on social media, posting vague, "Some people just don't support your dreams" quotes, and even hinting that I abandoned her in her time of need. Some of our extended family has reached out, telling me I should have been more patient. At this point, I don't even care. I gave her plenty of time, more than enough chances, and she treated my house like a free Airbnb while doing absolutely nothing to improve her situation. So, AITA for finally kicking my sister out? AITA for not attending my best friend's wedding after she asked me to pay for my own meal? I, 27F, have a best friend, Sarah, 28F, who I've known since high school. We've been through thick and thin together. She's always been one of the most important people in my life, and I was beyond excited when she got engaged a year ago. I started helping her with wedding plans right away, offering my time and support. I wasn't expecting to be a bridesmaid, but I was happy to help her with whatever she needed. She's always been a little more traditional and into the whole big wedding thing, which I wasn't necessarily into, but I supported her vision. Now, I'm going to be honest, Sarah's wedding has been complicated from the start. First, she went over her guest list several times, adding and subtracting people constantly. She and her fiancé, Tom, 29M, both come from large families, and the guest list ballooned to over 200 people. That seemed excessive to me, but I didn't want to complain, so I just rolled with it. When the invitations came out, I noticed something strange. On the RSVP card, there was a note that said, "Please be advised that due to budget constraints, all guests are asked to contribute $75 to cover the cost of their meal." I thought this was a mistake or maybe a typo. I showed it to my partner, Jack, 28M, and we were both confused. We've been to weddings before, and we've never been asked to pay for our own meal. I figured maybe she was joking, but when I texted Sarah to confirm, she said it was serious. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, especially considering how stressed Sarah had been with the wedding planning. So I replied, "Okay, I'll send the money soon," but internally I was taken aback. I've attended several weddings where the couple asks guests to contribute to the cost of the meal or a gift fund, but this felt different. I understood that weddings are expensive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was really out of the ordinary. Still, I didn't want to rock the boat. I was planning to go, support my best friend, and celebrate her big day. However, as the wedding got closer, things started to feel more and more off. Sarah started hinting at other costs. She mentioned that the venue was more expensive than they thought, and that Tom's family was not contributing as much financially as they'd hoped. I offered to help with decorations or anything I could do to take the load off her, but she kept saying that she just needed everyone to pay their share to make the wedding happen the way she envisioned it. Then, a few weeks before the wedding, Sarah called me in a panic. She told me that the costs had spiraled even further out of control, and she was worried about the food. She said that she had to make a last-minute change to the menu and that the new options would cost more. At this point, she asked if I'd be willing to chip in an additional $50 to cover the extra expense. I was starting to feel a bit uncomfortable, but I agreed because I wanted to be supportive and didn't want to create any tension before her big day. The day before the wedding, Sarah reached out again. She told me that the venue had added a surcharge for last-minute changes to the setup, and that she was now asking all guests to contribute another $25 to help with that. That would make my total contribution for the meal and the venue surcharge $150. I felt like this was getting completely out of hand. It wasn't just a small amount to help cover costs anymore. It was starting to feel like I was being asked to finance her wedding. But I didn't want to cause any more stress for her. So I said, fine, I'll send it over. Just let me know the details. By now, I was starting to feel a little resentful. I was trying to be understanding, but it seemed like the more I agreed to contribute, the more Sarah expected me to pay. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Over the years, I'd often found myself paying for things to help her with whatever she was going through, whether it was buying her dinner when she was low on cash, contributing to a charity she was involved in, or helping her with loans for other things. I'm not saying I've never asked her for help before, but it felt like I was always the one offering and paying, and I was starting to wonder if she saw me as an easy mark. As the wedding day approached, I found myself feeling less and less excited about it. I was dreading the idea of showing up, handing over a large chunk of money, and sitting through a lavish event where I felt more like a contributor than a guest. Jack could tell something was off, and I eventually confided in him that I was feeling uncomfortable with everything that was going on. He agreed that it seemed like a lot to ask of me, especially when I had already contributed quite a bit. The day of the wedding arrived, and I decided that I couldn't go. I'd been grappling with it for a while, but ultimately, I felt like the entire situation had become more about money than about celebrating my best friend. I tried to reach out to Sarah that morning to explain that I wouldn't be attending, but she was already caught up in the whirlwind of wedding preparations. I sent her a text telling her that I wasn't comfortable with how things had gone down financially and that, after much thought, I couldn't attend the wedding. She immediately called me, and I could hear the panic in her voice. She asked why I wasn't coming, and I explained how I felt about being asked to pay for so many things and how it didn't feel right to me anymore. I told her that I loved her and wanted to be there for her, but this wasn't what I had envisioned when I thought about supporting her on her big day. Sarah broke down on the phone. She said she didn't mean to make me feel uncomfortable and that it was just a tough situation with the wedding expenses. She kept apologizing and saying that she never wanted to make me feel like a cash machine. But at the same time, she also said she was disappointed that I wouldn't be there. She implied that my absence would hurt her deeply and that I was letting her down. I felt awful. It wasn't my intention to hurt her, but I also felt that I couldn't just keep saying yes to everything, especially when it came to money. The whole situation felt like an emotional manipulation tactic, and I was starting to resent the way things had unfolded. I've been getting messages from other friends and family asking where I am, and I've had to explain to them what happened. Most people seem to understand, but some of them have criticized me for not just sucking it up and going. They've told me that I should be supportive and that I should have known how hard weddings are to plan. Some have even said that if I really cared about Sarah, I would have gone no matter what. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. I love Sarah, and I want to support her, but I don't think it's right to ask guests to pay for their own meals, especially when it's a situation where the couple has already committed to a large wedding. Part of me feels guilty for not being there, but another part of me feels like I made the right decision. I'm hoping that over time, Sarah will understand, but right now, I'm not sure. So, AITA for not attending my best friend's wedding after she asked me to pay for my own meal? AITA for refusing to give up my inheritance to my sister, even though she needs it more. I, 34M, grew up in a family where my younger sister, Lisa, 30F, was always the priority. Our parents never admitted it, but it was obvious to anyone paying attention. Lisa was the miracle baby after my mom had trouble conceiving, and from the moment she was born, she was treated like a fragile angel who could do no wrong. If she threw a tantrum, I was told to just let it go. She's younger. If she wanted something I had, I was expected to share or just give it to her. If I had plans, they were often changed last minute to accommodate her needs. It only got worse as we grew older. My parents paid for all of Lisa's hobbies, activities, and later her college tuition in full. I, on the other hand, was expected to take out loans because you're a boy, you'll figure it out. When I protested, they said, Lisa has different needs than you. I learned to be independent early on. I worked through college, paid off my own debts, and built a decent career in finance. Lisa, on the other hand, bounced from major to major, never finished a degree, and eventually moved back home at 25. She has never held a full-time job longer than 6 months, always quitting because it was toxic or the manager was unfair. Fast forward to last year. Our father passed away unexpectedly. It was devastating, but as we handled the estate, something surprising happened. He left everything to me. I was shocked. I always assumed my parents would split things evenly, or worse, favor Lisa. But according to the will, everything, his house, his savings, his investments, was left in my name. Lisa lost it. She started crying, screaming, saying this had to be a mistake. My mom was just as shocked, but said maybe Dad assumed I would do the right thing and share. But after years of being told to put Lisa first, I was done. The will was clear, legally binding, and notarized. My father had left a separate letter for me, explaining his decision. He admitted that he had spent Lisa's entire life enabling her and that she had no sense of responsibility. He said he knew she would squander anything left to her, while I had proven to be responsible. He said that giving everything to me was the only way to make sure Lisa didn't just throw it all away. I didn't tell Lisa about the letter because I knew it wouldn't matter. When she realized I wasn't going to just hand over half, she went full victim mode. She told everyone in our extended family that I was stealing her future and that Dad would never have meant to cut her out. I got calls from aunts, uncles, and even some of our childhood neighbors saying I needed to do the right thing. My mother, of course, took Lisa's side completely. She said that if I had any heart at all, I would split things 50-50ths. I told her that if she felt that way, she could support Lisa herself. She told me that wasn't an option because, well, my parents had spent everything on Lisa while Dad was alive. That made my decision even easier. Lisa tried a different tactic, guilt. She called me in tears, saying she was practically homeless because she couldn't afford to live on her own. I reminded her that Mom still had a house and she could stay there. She said that wasn't the point and that I was abandoning my only sister. I asked her what she would have done if Dad had split everything equally. She said, well, I would have needed a bigger share because I have more expenses. That told me everything I needed to know. When I stood firm, Lisa escalated. She tried to contest the will, claiming Dad must have been coerced or not in his right mind. That failed, since the lawyer who handled it confirmed everything was done properly. Then she started showing up at my house, banging on my door, demanding I help family. I had to threaten to call the cops before she finally left. Now, even though the legal battle is over, the emotional fallout is ongoing. My mother barely speaks to me, except to send messages about how disappointed she is. My extended family is divided. Some think I was just following Dad's wishes, while others say I should have been the bigger person. Lisa, meanwhile, has gone full scorched earth. She blocked me on everything and posts sob stories on Facebook about how she was cheated out of her legacy. Some mutual friends have even messaged me, saying they had no idea I was so cruel. Honestly, I feel guilty sometimes. Not because I think I'm wrong, but because decades of conditioning make me feel like I should be helping Lisa. But then I remember all the times I was told to just give in, to let her have her way, to sacrifice my own needs for hers. I feel bad that she's struggling, but at the same time, she put herself in this position. She had every opportunity to work, save, and be responsible. She chose not to. So, AITA for refusing to give her a cent. AITA for refusing to let my brother move into our late parents' house. Even though he's struggling? I, 35M, have an older brother, Jake, 40M, and we were raised by parents who were, to put it kindly, traditional. They believed the eldest son was the heir, and the younger sibling should always respect and defer to him. That belief shaped our entire childhood and led to Jake becoming an entitled, lazy adult who always expected life to be handed to him. Growing up, I was expected to let Jake have everything first choice of toys, first slice of cake, first pick of vacations. If I ever protested, my parents would say, Jake is the older brother, you should respect him. When we became teenagers, Jake got a car for his 16th birthday. When I turned 16, I was told to use his hand-me-down, which was barely running. Jake barely made it through high school, scraping by with minimal effort. Meanwhile, I worked my ass off, got a scholarship, and left for college as soon as I could. Jake, on the other hand, stayed home and took over our parents' small business. And by took over, I mean, he showed up when he felt like it, expected the employees to do all the work, and spent most of his time partying. As you can probably guess, the business went under within a few years. Instead of accepting responsibility, Jake blamed the economy and disloyal employees and moved back in with our parents. From that point on, he basically mooched off them. He worked odd jobs here and there, but he never kept one for long. Fast forward to last year. Our parents tragically passed away in an accident. It was devastating, but what made it worse was the absolute circus that followed when we found out about their will. Jake, of course, assumed he would inherit everything. He had lived with our parents rent-free for years, and they had always doted on him. But when the will was read, we discovered that my parents had left everything to me. It turns out that in their later years, they had started to see Jake for what he really was. They wrote in the will that they loved both of us, but knew that I was responsible, while Jake had proven time and time again that he would squander any inheritance. The house, the savings, everything was legally mine. Jake was furious. He insisted it was a mistake, that they must have meant for him to have at least the house. He went through every stage of grief in record time: denial, anger, bargaining. He tried to contest the will, but it was solid. Then came the guilt trips. He said he had nowhere to go and no job prospects, and that, as his brother, I had a moral duty to let him stay in the house. I refused. I told him that I had worked my whole life to be independent while he had coasted by, expecting everything to be handed to him. I reminded him that our parents had spent decades enabling him and that they had finally seen the truth before they passed. Jake didn't take it well. He started showing up at the house, pounding on the door, screaming about how I was a traitor to family values. When I refused to let him in, he started turning extended family members against me. I got calls from aunts and uncles saying I was being cruel, that Jake has always struggled, and that family helps family. I asked them where they were when Jake was struggling. I asked if they would take him in. Silence. Jake escalated. He started squatting in the house. I had to legally evict my own brother. When he was finally forced out, he sent me a long, nasty message saying I had ruined his life and that he would never forgive me. It's been months, and I still get guilt-tripped by family members. Some say I should have at least let him stay temporarily. Others say our parents would have wanted us to work together, but I keep going back to the fact that our parents made this decision. They knew Jake. They knew me. They made their choice. So, AITA? AITA, forgoing no contact with my sister after she went behind my back and tried to take credit for my work. I, 27F, have a sister, Vanessa, 29F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. Growing up, it wasn't too bad. We had our typical sibling rivalry moments, but we mostly got along. As we got older, though, things started to change. Vanessa always had a way of making everything about her, and it felt like my achievements, no matter how big or small, were constantly being overshadowed by her need to be the center of attention. For the past few years, I've been working really hard in my career. I've always had a passion for graphic design and branding, and after graduating college, I landed a job at a mid-sized marketing agency. Over time, I've managed to prove myself and climb the ranks. I've been given more responsibility, and my team and I have successfully handled a lot of high-profile clients. I've put in years of late nights, sacrifice, and creative effort into building my portfolio and establishing myself in the industry. I'm proud of how far I've come, and I've always made an effort to remain humble about my accomplishments. My parents are supportive but sometimes a little distant, as they're more focused on the fact that Vanessa is still trying to find her footing career-wise. Vanessa has always been the one to bounce from job to job and never really stuck with anything long-term. So naturally, she's always been a bit envious of my stability. I've tried to support Vanessa through her various career changes, offering advice, sending her job postings, and even helping her create resumes and portfolios. But I've also always felt a little hurt by how little credit I get for my own achievements, especially in the family. When I got promoted to a senior designer role, my parents were happy for me, but Vanessa had this way of downplaying it and always focusing on her own struggles. She would say things like, "It must be nice to have a stable job," or "I don't know why you're so stressed. You've got it made." And while I get that she was struggling and was looking for support, it stung to have my hard work minimized. The tipping point came when I was given a huge opportunity at work. My company was tasked with creating a complete rebrand for a major national restaurant chain. It was an amazing project, and I was given the lead role, with my design and vision being the core of the branding. This project was a dream come true for me. It was exactly the kind of work I had always hoped to do, and it would put my name on the map in the industry. I was excited, but also nervous. It was a massive undertaking, and I knew I had to prove myself. I worked day and night, collaborating with my team and working closely with the client to get every detail just right. After months of hard work, the rebrand was a huge success, and the client was thrilled with the result. The restaurant chain launched their new brand, and it was a huge success in the media. My work was featured in industry publications, and I even got some recognition at my company for the project. Naturally, I shared the news with my family. My mom and dad were proud of me, but Vanessa's reaction was strange. She immediately started talking about how proud she was of our work. I was a little confused, so I asked her what she meant by that. She said, "Well, I was the one who gave you the idea to use that color palette, and the font choices were definitely inspired by the designs I showed you." I was taken aback because, while I had asked for her opinion on design elements in the past, none of the things she was claiming had any direct influence on the project. I'd spent months researching and developing my own vision for the rebrand. I politely corrected her, saying that the concept was entirely my own, and while I appreciated her feedback at times, it was my team and my design that brought the vision to life. She brushed it off and continued to act like the success was ours. Things got worse from there. A few days later, I found out that Vanessa had been telling our extended family that she helped with the project and that it was our design. She even posted on social media, tagging me in a post where she said, "So proud of our work on this project. So happy I could help my sister make her dreams come true." I was livid. This was not something I had agreed to, and I felt like she was trying to steal credit for something I had worked so hard on. I confronted her about it, and she was defensive. She said, "Well, I helped you in ways you don't even realize. I gave you advice on the design and the color choices. I've been there for you all along, and I think it's unfair that you're not giving me any credit." I tried to explain to her that I valued her support, but that this was my work, my vision, and my effort. She seemed to dismiss my feelings and said, "It's not that serious. It's just a project and we're family. I'm proud of you, and you should appreciate that." At that point, I was done. I couldn't keep letting her diminish my accomplishments, and I couldn't keep letting her manipulate situations for her own gain. I told her that I didn't want her posting about my work anymore, and that I didn't want her taking credit for things she didn't do. She told me I was overreacting, and that I should just be happy that she was proud of me. I told her that I didn't need her fake support, and I was done. I went no contact with her shortly after that conversation. I've been avoiding her calls and texts ever since, and I've stopped responding to her social media posts. My parents are upset with me and say that I'm being harsh. They think I should just let it go and forgive Vanessa. They say that family should support each other, and that I'm making a big deal out of nothing. I've tried to explain to them that it's not about her being proud of me. It's about her trying to take credit for something that was solely my work, and how she's been doing this for years. My friends agree with me, and they think I made the right call in distancing myself from someone who continuously disrespects my achievements. But now, I'm feeling conflicted. I've always tried to be the bigger person in the past, but this time, I feel like I've been pushed too far. I'm heartbroken that my sister, the person I've always tried to support, would do something like this. But at the same time, I feel like I need to stand my ground and protect my hard work. I'm not sure if going no contact was the right decision, and I'm starting to wonder if I've been too harsh. So, AITA for going no contact with my sister after she went behind my back and tried to take credit for my work. AITA for refusing to let my neighbor's son borrow my car. Even though I technically don't use it every day, I, 34M, live in a suburban neighborhood where most people know each other, but we're not exactly best friends. I keep to myself, work from home, and generally avoid drama. I own 2 cars. One is my daily driver, and the other is an older but well-maintained sedan that I mostly use for longer trips or when I need a backup. It's fully insured, registered, and parked in my driveway. I don't drive it daily, but I like having a second car just in case. A few weeks ago, my neighbor Tom, 45M, knocked on my door with his 17-year-old son, Ryan. I don't interact with them much, but I know they've lived here for about 5 years. Tom is generally friendly, but we're not close. Tom explained that Ryan had just gotten his driver's license, but they couldn't afford to buy him a car yet. He asked if I'd be willing to let Ryan borrow my extra car for a while, maybe just to get to school, run errands, and build responsibility. He promised they'd pay for gas and wouldn't abuse it. I was honestly shocked. Who asks a near stranger to borrow a whole car? I politely declined, saying I wasn't comfortable lending my vehicle to someone I barely knew. Tom looked a little surprised but didn't push too hard. He just said, "Well, if you ever change your mind, let us know." I figured that was the end of it. But over the next couple of weeks, things started getting weird. Ryan would make comments if he saw me outside like, "Man, it must be nice to have two cars when some of us don't even have one." Tom's wife, Lisa, saw me one morning and said, "It would really mean a lot to Ryan if you let him use that car. It's just sitting there." Then came the guilt trips. Tom knocked on my door again, this time with a more aggressive tone. He told me I was being selfish and that I clearly didn't need the car. I reminded him that it was my property and that I wasn't comfortable loaning it out. He scoffed and said, "It's just sitting there gathering dust. You'd rather let it rot than help a kid." At this point, I was getting annoyed. I firmly told him no again and said that I wasn't discussing it any further. Tom left, clearly pissed off. Then, about a week ago, I noticed that someone had tried to open the car. The door handle felt loose, and there were smudges on the windows like someone had pressed their face against the glass. I checked my security cameras, and surprise, surprise, it was Ryan. He had come into my driveway late at night and tried to get into the car. He didn't break anything, but it was clear he was trying to see if it was unlocked. I immediately went next door and confronted Tom and Lisa. They tried to play dumb at first, but when I showed them the footage, Lisa just sighed and said, "He's just desperate for a little freedom. It's not like he was trying to steal it." I told them that if Ryan ever stepped onto my property again without permission, I'd call the police. Tom got defensive, saying I was overreacting and that I needed to relax. I told a few neighbors about what happened, and opinions are split. Some think Tom and his family are out of line, while others think I should just let it go since nothing was actually stolen. A couple of people even hinted that I should let Ryan use the car since it's not a big deal and would help out a kid in need. Now I'm starting to wonder, am I being too harsh? Should I have just let Ryan borrow the car for a while? Or am I right to stand my ground? AITA for choosing my friend's dog over my sister's wedding? So this is a bit of a long one, and I honestly don't even know if I'm in the wrong here, so I thought I'd share it and get some perspective. I, 28M, have a friend, let's call him Mike, 30M, who has been one of my closest friends for about 10 years. We met in college, and while we've both gone on to do our own things, we've always kept in touch. Mike's a big dog person and has this adorable rescue dog, a golden retriever mix named Rufus. I love Rufus to death, and every time I visit Mike, I spend more time with his dog than with him. Honestly, Rufus is just one of those dogs that instantly makes you feel at home, and I've been attached to him since the first time I met him. Now, here's where the issue starts. My sister, let's call her Emily 26F, is getting married in a few weeks. She's been planning this wedding for over a year, and it's been a pretty big deal in our family. She's always been the center of attention, and I've learned to let it go, but this wedding has definitely been a lot of pressure for everyone. She's been organizing everything down to the smallest detail, and she's very particular about how things should go. At the same time, she has a tendency to make everything feel like the biggest crisis of all time, even if it's something small. A week ago, Mike called me to ask if I could dog-sit Rufus for the weekend. He and his girlfriend were going out of town for a wedding, not Emily's, and he didn't want to leave Rufus in a kennel. Since I already take care of Rufus every now and then, he asked if I could watch him for the weekend, and of course I said yes. Rufus and I have a routine, and I love spending time with him, so it didn't seem like a big deal. Plus, Mike and his girlfriend were going to be gone for 3 days, so I'd have plenty of time to hang out with the dog. Fast forward a couple of days, and I get a message from my sister Emily. She tells me she needs me to be at her wedding rehearsal dinner the night before her wedding. I already knew the rehearsal dinner was happening, but I hadn't committed to attending because I thought I'd be taking care of Rufus, and that was my priority. I explained to Emily that I'd be dog-sitting for Mike that weekend and wouldn't be able to make it to the dinner. Well, Emily completely flipped out. She started saying things like, It's only one night. Why can't you just cancel on Mike? And this is my big day, and you're choosing a dog over your sister's wedding? That's messed up. I tried to explain that I had made a commitment to Mike and that I had agreed to watch Rufus, but Emily was having none of it. She went on and on about how unimportant the dog was compared to her wedding and how I needed to be there for her because she's my sister. I told her I was sorry, but that I had already made plans and couldn't break them, and that I would definitely be at the wedding itself, but not the rehearsal dinner. That's when things really escalated. Emily started texting our mom, telling her I was choosing a dog over family and that I was ruining her special day. Our mom called me shortly after to tell me how disappointed she was in my decision. She tried to guilt-trip me into canceling on Mike and going to the rehearsal dinner, saying that family comes first and that it wasn't a big deal to watch Rufus another time. But I really didn't want to cancel because Mike and I had made the plan together, and I didn't want to let him down, especially because he was trusting me with his dog. At this point, I started feeling like I was in a lose-lose situation. On one hand, I didn't want to be the one who ruined Emily's wedding by not showing up for something she considered important. But on the other hand, I didn't want to let Mike down either. He'd asked for my help, and I had agreed, and it didn't feel fair to back out last minute. I tried to explain everything to Emily one more time, but she wasn't having it. She told me that if I didn't show up to the rehearsal dinner, then I could forget about being in her life. She said I was a terrible brother, and that I had no sense of what family means. That really hurt, but I still felt like I couldn't back out on Mike. The day of the rehearsal dinner, I went to Mike's place to take care of Rufus, and I ended up posting a picture of me and the dog hanging out on social media. Emily saw it and immediately texted me, saying, "Are you seriously posting pictures of the dog while I'm over here getting ready for my wedding?" I didn't respond to her text because I honestly felt like I couldn't win. She posted something passive-aggressive on social media, too, about how family should come before anything else, which just made everything worse. Eventually, Emily and I got into a huge argument. She said that I was selfish and that I had no concept of family or loyalty. I tried to explain that it wasn't about loyalty. It was about keeping my word to someone who's been a close friend for years. But she didn't care. She told me that if I didn't come to the wedding ceremony the next day, she would disown me. I went to her wedding the next day, but it was clear that the tension was still there. Emily barely spoke to me, and our mom kept giving me the side eye like I was the one who'd done something wrong. The whole day felt really awkward and uncomfortable, and it was honestly one of the worst weddings I've ever attended. Now, I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of this whole thing. I don't want to lose my sister, but at the same time, I don't think I did anything wrong by keeping my commitment to Mike. I've always tried to be a good brother, but it feels like no matter what I do, I can't win. So, Reddit, AITA, for choosing to dog sit for Mike instead of going to my sister's rehearsal dinner? Should I have just sucked it up and gone to the dinner to avoid this drama? Or did I make the right choice by sticking to my plans? AITA for telling my sister to stop bringing her dog everywhere after it bit my child? So, let me start by saying that I love my sister, 34F. She's always been there for me, 29M, through thick and thin. We're close, and I genuinely appreciate her support. However, there's a situation that's recently come up that has created some serious tension between us, and now I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong here. I have a 3-year-old son, Lucas, who is the light of my life. He's sweet, energetic, and very curious. We also have a 5-year-old golden retriever named Max, who's the friendliest dog you can imagine. Max is wonderful with Lucas, and they've been growing up together, so Lucas is used to being around dogs. My wife, 30F, and I do our best to teach Lucas how to behave around animals. Always be gentle, respect their space, etc. Here's where the problem starts. My sister has a dog, a small but very feisty breed, an Australian Shepherd mix. The dog, named Daisy, is sweet when she's with my sister and other people, but she has a pretty unpredictable temper. At least that's how I've always seen it. My sister has a habit of bringing Daisy with her everywhere she goes. I don't mean just casual places. She brings her to family dinners, shopping trips, and even to my house when we have get-togethers. I get that people love their pets, and I'm an animal lover myself, but Daisy's behavior is honestly concerning to me. For example, Daisy has snapped at people before when they've gotten too close to her food or tried to pet her while she's not in the mood. She's also been territorial with other dogs, which I thought was just a phase, but it seems like it's a pattern. My sister doesn't really do much to correct this behavior, and she's always defending Daisy, saying it's just how she is and that people need to respect her space. We've had a few awkward moments where Daisy has been a little too aggressive with Max at family events, and while nothing major happened, it's made me uncomfortable. But I didn't make a big deal out of it, because it was just minor stuff. Until one day, everything escalated. It was a Sunday afternoon, and my wife, Lucas, and I were having a quiet day at home. My sister decided to drop by unannounced, as she often does, and she brought Daisy along. At first, everything seemed fine. Daisy was running around the backyard with Max, and they were getting along okay. But then, things took a turn. Lucas, being the curious toddler that he is, was outside playing with his toy truck. He wandered over to where Daisy was lying in the sun, and without thinking, he bent down to pet her. Now, I know it's always a risk with any dog, and I've taught Lucas to always ask permission before petting a dog. But Lucas wasn't thinking about that in the moment. He just saw a dog and wanted to say hi. As soon as Lucas bent down to touch Daisy, she snapped at him. It happened so fast. I saw the look of confusion and fear on Lucas's face just before Daisy bit his hand. Thank God it wasn't a serious injury. He had a small puncture wound, and it wasn't bleeding much, but it was still bad enough to scare the hell out of both of us. My wife rushed Lucas inside to clean up the wound, and I turned to my sister in complete shock. I was furious, and I think I may have shouted. I told her that she needed to be more responsible with Daisy, that she shouldn't bring a dog like that around children if she can't control her. My sister immediately got defensive. She said that Daisy would never hurt anyone on purpose, and that Lucas must have done something to provoke her. She said that dogs are just like people, and sometimes they have bad days. I tried to explain that I understood that, but that didn't mean she should be letting Daisy behave like that without consequences. My wife and I took Lucas to the doctor just to make sure everything was okay. Thankfully, it wasn't a major injury, but we were shaken up by the whole experience. I called my sister later that night to check in on her, and she was still upset, saying that I overreacted. She said Daisy was just being a dog and that I shouldn't have blown it out of proportion. She also accused me of making her feel bad about her dog and that she was tired of everyone treating Daisy like she's a problem. Over the next few days, my wife and I talked a lot about the incident. We decided that it was probably time to set some boundaries with my sister about bringing Daisy over, especially if there are kids around. We told my sister that while we're happy to have her over, we felt uncomfortable with her bringing Daisy without giving us a heads up. We also told her that if Daisy couldn't be trusted around Lucas, then it would be better if she didn't bring the dog over at all. My sister was not happy about this, and she accused me of not being supportive of her. She said that I was treating her like a bad pet owner, and that I was trying to control her life. She said that Daisy was her family, and she felt like we were excluding her and her dog. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the dog, but about making sure everyone, especially the kids, was safe, but it didn't seem to help. The situation has caused a lot of tension in our family. My parents are on my sister's side, saying that I shouldn't be so hard on her and that I'm overreacting. They believe Daisy is harmless and that my reaction was too extreme. Some of my other relatives are more on my side, saying that I'm just trying to protect my son and that it's not unreasonable to want my sister to be more careful about where and when she brings her dog. To make matters worse, my wife has been getting pressure from her side of the family to just let it go. They don't want this to turn into a big family drama, but I don't know how to back down without feeling like I'm putting my son's safety at risk. I've tried explaining my concerns to my sister, but every conversation turns into an argument. I've been going back and forth, wondering if maybe I overreacted. Should I have been more understanding of her attachment to her dog? Was I too harsh in telling her to stop bringing Daisy around? I love my sister, but I don't want to put Lucas in a situation where he could get hurt again. So, AITA for telling my sister to stop bringing her dog everywhere after it bit my child. AITA for telling my friend she can't stay with me after a breakup because I don't like her new boyfriend. I, 27M, have a friend, Emily, 26F, who I've known since college. We met through mutual friends and hit it off right away. Over the years, we've grown really close, and she's always been there for me during tough times. We've always had a kind of brother-sister dynamic, and I value her friendship a lot. A few months ago, Emily started dating this guy, Mark, 29M. At first, I didn't think much of it. Emily had gone through a rough patch with her last relationship, and I was just happy she found someone new. But as time went on, I started to notice some red flags about Mark, and I really didn't like him. He had a lot of the traits I personally find off-putting. He's a bit arrogant, overly critical of others, and he's always making snide remarks about people, including me. He would constantly put down Emily's friends and family, and that made me uncomfortable. He's the kind of guy who acts like he's too good for people, but at the same time, he doesn't do anything with his life to back it up. I didn't say anything to Emily about how I felt because, at first, I thought it was just a phase. I didn't want to be the overprotective friend who gets involved in her relationship. But after a few months, it became clear that Mark wasn't a good fit for her. He was controlling, dismissive of her feelings, and every time I saw them together, Emily just seemed to lose a little bit of herself. She started becoming more distant, canceling plans, and making excuses to avoid spending time with me. I could tell she was unhappy, but she refused to admit it to herself. Every time I'd bring up my concerns, she'd brush them off and say I didn't understand him or that I was being too judgmental. Fast forward to last week. Emily and Mark had a huge fight, and she called me crying, saying that they broke up. I could tell she was devastated, and I immediately told her I was there for her no matter what. She said she needed a place to stay for a while because she didn't want to go back to her apartment, where she'd have to face Mark again. Of course, I told her she was welcome to stay with me for as long as she needed. We agreed she'd come over the following weekend. The day before she was supposed to come, she called me again, sounding a bit uncertain. She told me she was still upset about the breakup, but that she and Mark had talked things through and that he had apologized for everything. I immediately started feeling uneasy because it seemed like she was getting back together with him. I asked her directly if she was planning on taking him back, and she hesitated for a moment before saying, "Well, maybe. But we just need some time apart, you know?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to sound harsh, but I also didn't want her to get back into a relationship with someone who had clearly treated her badly. I told her that I thought it might be a good idea to spend some time away from him to focus on herself. She agreed, but kept going back to how much she loved him and how they could work through their issues. When she arrived at my place the next day, things were awkward. She didn't really talk about the breakup much, and instead, she spent a lot of time on her phone, texting Mark. It was obvious that she was still emotionally attached to him, which I get. It's hard to walk away from someone you care about, even if they've treated you poorly. But I couldn't help but feel frustrated because I knew that if she went back to him, she'd just get hurt again. That evening, we went out for dinner, and she seemed to be in better spirits. She was laughing and joking, but it felt a bit forced to me. At one point, she mentioned how Mark was working on himself and how she was proud of him. I was so close to saying something, but I didn't want to make her feel like I was attacking her decisions. The next day, things took a turn. I got a message from Mark, and I knew right away that something was off. He texted me asking if I was planning on keeping Emily at my place for long. He mentioned that she was still his girlfriend and that he wanted her to come back home. I immediately felt my blood pressure rise. Who was he to tell me how long I could have my friend at my place? But I kept my cool and told him that Emily was staying with me for a while to clear her head. He didn't like that response and started texting me more aggressively. He called me a third wheel and accused me of trying to steal his girl. He even threatened to come over and talk to me if I didn't send Emily back. I showed Emily the texts, and she was shocked. She apologized for not telling me about Mark reaching out earlier and said she was sorry for putting me in the middle. She said she'd deal with Mark and that she'd stop talking to him for a while. But the whole situation left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't want to be involved in her relationship drama, especially if she was still considering going back to him. I thought that if she stayed at my place any longer, I'd be enabling her to continue down a path that I knew wasn't good for her. I decided to have an honest conversation with her. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with Mark contacting me and that I felt like if she was going to stay with me, she needed to be serious about moving forward and not just using me as a temporary escape. I told her that I didn't want her to be in the middle of a toxic relationship, and if she was going to get back together with Mark, then she needed to leave my place and work things out with him. I said that I loved her as a friend, but I couldn't watch her put herself through this cycle of breakups and makeups with him. I told her that I felt like I couldn't support her while she was still emotionally tied to him. She got upset and said I was being unfair. She said I was acting like I knew what was best for her and that she was allowed to make her own decisions. She said I was being controlling and that I should just let her figure things out on her own. She accused me of not being supportive and told me that if I really cared about her, I would let her stay and give her the space to make her own choices. I feel terrible about the situation, but at the same time, I think I've done what's best for both of us. I love Emily, and I just don't want to see her get hurt again. But now, I'm feeling guilty. Did I overstep by telling her to choose between Mark and me? AITA for telling my friend she can't stay with me after a breakup because I don't like her new boyfriend? AITA for refusing to help my sister after she made a huge mistake with her finances? I, 28M, have a younger sister, 25F, named Emily. Growing up, we were always close, though there were a few bumps along the way. We shared a lot of the same friends and had similar interests, but when it came to personal finance, we were always on opposite ends of the spectrum. I've always been careful with money, keeping track of my spending and saving where I could. Emily, on the other hand, has always been more carefree with her finances. While I've always been frugal, she's always been more impulsive. For context, I graduated college with a solid job in tech, and I was fortunate to land a pretty good salary right out of school. I've been saving for retirement and have investments set up. I've worked hard to make sure I'm financially stable. Emily, on the other hand, went to college for graphic design, which she loves, but she hasn't been able to find a full-time job in her field. She works as a freelance designer, but it's inconsistent, and she struggles to make ends meet at times. While she's extremely talented, her financial decisions haven't always been the best. A few years ago, Emily took out a car loan for a car that was clearly above her budget. She wanted something cool and flashy and didn't care much about how much it would cost in the long run. I tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed me off, saying she'd make it work. Fast forward to now, and the car loan has become a massive burden for her. The payments are too high for her, and she's been unable to keep up with them. She's behind on payments and now has to pay a large portion of the loan in fees and interest. To make matters worse, she also has credit card debt that's growing because she hasn't been able to pay off the balances. A couple of months ago, Emily came to me asking for financial help. She told me she was drowning in debt and needed me to step in and help her pay off the car loan. She said if she didn't, her car would be repossessed and it would ruin her credit. She said she had no other options and that I was her last hope. I'm not going to lie, I was really taken aback by her request. I've always been willing to help her in the past when she needed it, but this felt different. It felt like she was asking me to bail her out of a situation she got herself into because of her own poor financial choices. I explained to her that I wasn't in a position to pay off her loan. I told her that while I loved her and wanted to see her succeed, I couldn't help her in the way she was asking. I also reminded her that I had warned her against buying that car in the first place and that it was important for her to take responsibility for her own decisions. She didn't take it well. She accused me of being selfish, saying that I was the one who had the means to help her, so I should. She even brought up how she'd always been there for me in the past, especially when I was going through a tough breakup a few years ago. She made me feel guilty for not being more supportive. I didn't budge, though. I told her that I couldn't make her mistakes my problem, and that it wasn't healthy for her to continue relying on other people to fix her financial issues. She's an adult now, and I told her that part of growing up is taking responsibility for your own actions, even when they're tough to face. I told her that I could help her by offering advice on budgeting and managing her debt, but I wasn't going to give her a lump sum of money to fix everything. Emily was furious and stormed out of my apartment. She hasn't spoken to me much since then, and every time we've had a family gathering, there's been noticeable tension between us. Our parents have gotten involved too. They're upset with me for not helping her out, saying I should have done more to support her. My mom says that family is supposed to help each other, and that I should have at least tried to help her with part of the loan. She says that I'm being too harsh, and that I'm making Emily feel abandoned. My dad, on the other hand, has been pretty neutral, though he did say that I shouldn't have been so direct with her about how she got into the mess in the first place. I've been feeling conflicted. On one hand, I know I've done the right thing by not enabling her behavior, and I want her to learn from her mistakes. But on the other hand, I don't want to lose my sister over something like this. I feel like I can't win. She's hurt, my parents are disappointed in me, and I'm starting to feel like maybe I should have been more empathetic in my response. I just don't want to set a precedent where she expects me to fix everything for her. So now I'm wondering, AITA for refusing to help my sister with her debt? Should I have done more to help her, even if it means enabling her to keep making poor financial choices? Or did I make the right call in not bailing her out? AITA for telling my brother that I'm not attending his graduation party because he didn't invite my daughter? I, 35M, have a daughter, Emily, who is 9 years old. My brother, 28M, Mike, is graduating from college soon, and he's throwing a big party to celebrate. We've always been close, and I've always been supportive of his academic and personal achievements. However, recently, things have been a bit tense between us due to some issues surrounding Emily and the party. To give a bit of context, Mike and I grew up in a household where family was always a big deal. Our parents were very close-knit and believed in everyone being included in each other's lives, which was something that stuck with both of us as we got older. I've always tried to follow that principle in my own family, especially when it comes to celebrations or milestones. Emily is my only child, and she's very much a part of my life, so I always make sure that she's included in everything I do, including family events. Now, Mike has always been a bit distant when it comes to kids, and while he's always been kind to Emily, he's never really shown much interest in her. He's the type who prefers hanging out with his friends, and while I get that, I always felt it was important to make sure he was involved in family matters. He's never been one to express a lot of affection for kids, which was fine with me as long as he was respectful towards her. However, things have started to change recently, and that's where the trouble began. About a month ago, Mike started planning his graduation party, and of course, he told me about it right away. He's been talking about this party for weeks, and it's clear that he's put a lot of effort into organizing it. It's going to be at a local venue, and he mentioned that he's invited a lot of friends, some extended family, and a few colleagues. I was excited for him. Graduating from college is a big achievement, and I knew he was looking forward to celebrating with everyone. A week before the party, I received the invitation. It was formal with details about the venue, the date, and the time, but there was one thing that immediately stood out to me. Emily wasn't invited. There was no mention of her anywhere on the invite. I thought it was a mistake, so I called Mike to ask about it. When I brought it up, he sounded a bit awkward and said that he was keeping the party adults only because of the venue restrictions. I told him I understood that, but I also pointed out that we're family, and it would be nice to have Emily there to celebrate his achievement, especially since she's my only child and I can't leave her alone at home while I attend. Mike then told me that it was just going to be a more grown-up event and that he was focusing on people he'd spent the most time with during college, including his friends and classmates. He said he didn't want a ton of kids running around. He even joked about how Emily might be bored at the party because it wasn't going to be the type of place for a kid to enjoy. I tried to let that go, but it stung a little. It felt like he was making excuses to exclude her, and it hurt because we had always been a family that valued togetherness. I asked him directly if there was any way Emily could come, even just for a little while. He hesitated and then said, "Look, it's nothing personal. I just want this party to be about celebrating with the people who were a big part of my college life." I could tell he was being a bit evasive, but I didn't push him further at that moment. After the call, I spent the rest of the day thinking about it. I understand that parties can have a certain vibe, and I get that Mike might want to celebrate with his friends in a way that's different from what a family event might look like. But the more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. This was a major milestone in his life, and Emily is his niece, she's family. Excluding her from an important event felt like a slap in the face to both of us. She adores her uncle, and she was excited about going to the party and celebrating with him. I felt like Mike was putting his friends ahead of family, which hurt more than I expected. I decided that I wasn't going to attend the party unless Emily could come too. I wasn't going to leave her behind just because Mike didn't want her there. I know it's his party and his choice, but the whole situation felt off to me. So, I called him again and told him that I wouldn't be coming to the party unless he invited Emily as well. I explained that it was important to me that she be included, and I wasn't comfortable with the idea of attending without her. I didn't want to create a rift, but I also felt like my family should come first. Mike was immediately upset. He told me that I was being unreasonable and that he'd already made it clear the party was adults only. He said that it wasn't fair to make him change his plans just because I wanted to bring Emily. I tried to reason with him, saying that it wasn't about changing his whole party, just letting Emily come for a short time, maybe for the first hour or two. But Mike wouldn't budge. He said he didn't want to deal with the awkwardness of having a kid at an adult event. He kept repeating that it was nothing personal, but I couldn't help but feel like he was prioritizing his own comfort over family. At this point, I was really hurt and angry. I've always supported Mike in everything he's done, and I feel like I've been there for him through thick and thin. But this felt different. It wasn't just about a party. It felt like he didn't care enough about my daughter to include her in such an important event. I couldn't bring myself to go to the party knowing that Emily wasn't invited, and it felt like a betrayal to both of us. I ended up telling Mike that I wasn't going to attend his graduation party if Emily wasn't invited. He didn't take that well and ended up telling me that I was being dramatic and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. He accused me of trying to control the situation and said that he was tired of me making everything about my kid. He said he didn't want to argue anymore and that I should just let him enjoy his party without me making it an issue. We haven't spoken much since then. My parents have gotten involved, and they've been telling me I should just let it go. They say that it's Mike's party and that I should respect his wishes. My wife is on my side, saying that it's ridiculous for Mike to exclude Emily, especially since she's so close to him. But Mike's been sending passive-aggressive messages about how disappointed he is that I'm ruining his celebration, and it's been hard to know how to handle this situation. So, AITA for telling my brother I won't attend his graduation party unless he invites my daughter? AITA for refusing to help my brother after he got himself into legal trouble? I, 29M, have a younger brother, Jake, 24M. We've always had a somewhat complicated relationship. Growing up, he was the troublemaker, and I was the responsible one. Our parents always tried to balance their attention between us, but I could see that Jake often got away with more. He was charming, and somehow, no matter how much trouble he caused, people would always end up giving him the benefit of the doubt. I was the straight-laced one who never wanted to rock the boat, and I always felt like I had to keep things together. Over the years, things didn't really change. I went to college, worked hard to get a stable job in marketing, and I've been building my career ever since. Jake, on the other hand, has always floated around without any real direction. He went to college for a couple of years but dropped out because he didn't like the grind. Since then, he's bounced between odd jobs, freelancing gigs, and living off of our parents' goodwill. Our parents have always supported him in one way or another, which I've always thought wasn't helping him in the long run, but I kept my opinions to myself. About 6 months ago, Jake called me in the middle of the night, asking for my help. I was asleep, so I didn't get the call until the morning. When I saw it, I immediately assumed it was something urgent, so I called him back. He sounded shaken, but not quite frantic. He told me that he'd been arrested for assault. Apparently, he had gotten into an argument at a bar, and it escalated when he pushed someone who then hit their head on the ground. The person had to go to the hospital, and Jake was facing criminal charges. He told me that he was scared and that he needed my help to get a lawyer and cover his bail. The bail amount was high, about $10,000, and I didn't have that kind of cash just lying around. I was immediately taken aback. Jake has never been in serious legal trouble before, and while I wasn't exactly surprised he'd gotten into a bar fight, I was shocked by the severity of the situation. It was clear that this wasn't something that could be brushed off easily. I asked Jake what happened, and he explained it as a misunderstanding that had escalated too far. According to him, the person he'd pushed was being aggressive first, and that he was just defending himself. He wasn't being totally forthcoming about the details, but he was begging me for help. He said he'd made a huge mistake, but he didn't want to go to jail or have his life ruined over one bad decision. I've always been the one who's tried to do the right thing, and I felt torn. On one hand, I wanted to help my brother, but on the other hand, I was frustrated. Jake had a history of poor decisions, whether it was financial problems, personal relationships, or now legal issues. He'd never taken responsibility for his actions in the past, and I didn't want to encourage him to think he could keep relying on others to fix his problems. I told him that I couldn't afford to pay his bail, and that I wasn't sure if I could get involved financially at all. I offered to help him find a lawyer and suggested he speak with a public defender if money was tight. But Jake wasn't happy with that response. He immediately turned defensive and said I was being harsh, that families should help each other out when it really counts. He even accused me of not caring about him and only thinking of myself. It felt like a complete guilt trip. I reminded him that I'd always been there for him emotionally, and I had supported him in the past, even when he made bad decisions. But this was different. This was serious, and I didn't think bailing him out would teach him anything. I tried to reason with him, but he didn't want to hear it. Instead, he kept pushing the idea that I had the means to help, and I was just choosing not to. I explained that helping him in this situation wasn't just about money. It was about making him realize that actions have consequences. If I bailed him out now, I felt like I would be enabling him to avoid facing those consequences. At that point, Jake stopped responding to my calls and texts. I left it alone for a few days, but eventually I got a call from our parents. They were livid with me. They said I was being cold-hearted and that I was abandoning Jake in his time of need. My mom, especially, was adamant that I should have helped him, saying that family sticks together. She brought up how I had always been the responsible one, and how I should set an example for Jake by stepping up and showing him that we care. My dad was less upset, but he still thought I should have helped him with the bail money. He said that Jake was young and made a mistake, and he didn't want him to get into further legal trouble. I tried to explain that helping Jake in this way wasn't going to solve the root issue, and that he needed to take responsibility for his actions. But they didn't want to hear it. The argument ended with me saying that I wasn't going to change my mind, and I hung up feeling frustrated and drained. Jake finally called me a few days later, but he wasn't apologetic. He was still angry at me for not helping him, and he told me he couldn't believe I was turning my back on him. He mentioned how I've always had it easier than him, how I've always been financially stable and successful, and how I should have done more to level the playing field by helping him out now. That hit me hard. I didn't know how to respond. Since then, we've barely spoken. There's been an awkward tension between us whenever we see each other at family gatherings. I feel like I've done what I needed to do in this situation. I love my brother, but I also feel like I've spent years cleaning up after him and trying to help him make better choices. At some point, I think it's his turn to face the consequences and take responsibility for his actions. But now, I'm starting to feel like I've alienated my whole family, and I'm wondering if I've been too harsh. AITA for refusing to help my brother out of his legal trouble? Should I have stepped in and helped him with bail? Or did I make the right choice by letting him face the consequences of his actions? AITA for not letting my friend bring Herb emotional support animal to my apartment, even though she insists it's necessary? I, 29M, have a small apartment in a busy city. It's not luxurious, but it's mine and I'm proud of it. I've always been a pretty private person when it comes to my living space. I'm not against having guests over, but I like to keep things comfortable and relatively quiet in my own home. My best friend, Sarah, 28F, and I have known each other for years. We've been through a lot together, and she's always been someone I can count on. She's kind-hearted, smart, and funny, but over the past few months, I've started to notice some changes in her behavior that have me a bit concerned. Sarah has always had a bit of anxiety, but in recent months, it seems to have gotten worse. She's been struggling with work, personal life issues, and just general stress. I've tried to be supportive, and I'm always there to listen when she needs to talk. However, one thing that's been bothering me is her insistence that she needs to bring Herb emotional support animal, ESA, a large dog named Max, everywhere she goes. Max is a sweet dog, but he's very big and energetic. I don't have a problem with pets, but my apartment isn't really suited for a dog of his size. I've mentioned this to Sarah before, but she always brushes it off, saying that Max helps her with her anxiety and that she's legally allowed to bring him anywhere because he's an ESA. Recently, Sarah asked me if she could stay at my place for a week because she was feeling overwhelmed and needed a break. I was happy to offer her a place to stay, knowing that she's been going through a tough time. However, she then mentioned that she would need to bring Max with her. I immediately felt uncomfortable with the idea. My apartment is small, and while I like dogs, I'm not sure I'm ready to have a large dog running around in my space for an entire week. I told Sarah that I didn't think it would work because my apartment isn't big enough, and I wasn't sure how Max would behave in such a small space. She was disappointed, but said that she couldn't be away from him for that long, especially since he was so important to her mental health. I tried to compromise by suggesting that we could look into pet sitting services or see if someone else could take care of Max while she stayed with me. She immediately shut that down, saying that nobody else would understand the bond she has with Max, and she needed him with her. She explained that he was her emotional support animal and that he made her feel safe and calm, which I completely understand. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was asking a lot of me. I kept trying to explain that my apartment just wasn't big enough for a dog like Max, especially since I work from home and my daily routine involves a lot of quiet time, which might not be ideal with a dog running around. Sarah insisted that Max was very well behaved and that he wouldn't cause any problems. She even promised that she would take care of him entirely, but I wasn't sure if that would be enough. The last thing I wanted was to be constantly worried about my apartment being destroyed or Max being disruptive while I was trying to get work done. The situation started to escalate when I asked her if she could possibly make other arrangements. She got really upset and said I didn't understand how much she needed Max. She told me that I was being unsupportive and that if I were really her friend, I would make an exception for her, especially since she was already struggling. She said that it felt like I didn't care about her mental health and that I was choosing my comfort over her well-being. This hit me hard because I've always tried to be there for her, and I didn't want her to think I didn't care. The more I thought about it, the more I started to feel like I was in a difficult position. I understand that Sarah has anxiety and that Max is important to her, but at the same time, I don't think I should be expected to accommodate a large dog in my small apartment when I've already expressed my concerns. I don't have an issue with pets, but I do have limits when it comes to what I can handle in my living space. Eventually, I told Sarah that I couldn't let Max stay with us, and that I'd be happy to help her find another place to stay if she didn't feel comfortable without him. I also offered to help her look into local services or dog-sitting options, but she refused. She was really upset, and we ended up having a pretty heated argument. She accused me of not respecting her needs and said that it felt like I was abandoning her during a tough time. She said that she couldn't come stay at my place if I wasn't willing to let Max come along, and that I was being selfish. It's been a few days since the argument, and I still feel torn. On one hand, I understand that Sarah's mental health is important, and I don't want to downplay her anxiety. On the other hand, I feel like I shouldn't have to compromise my living space and comfort just because of her emotional support animal. I've had friends tell me that I'm within my rights to set boundaries in my own home, but I can't help feeling like I've let her down. I just don't know if I'm being unreasonable in this situation. So, AITA for not letting my friend bring her emotional support animal to my apartment, even though she says she needs it?